The bridge of the human exploration vessel Wanderer was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring systems and the occasional sip of coffee. Captain James stood by the main viewport, watching the stars drift by as his ship patrolled the outer edges of human space. "Captain, we've got multiple contacts appearing on long-range sensors," called out Mike from his scanning station. He adjusted his reading glasses, squinting at the screen. Wow, it's a lot of ships." James walked over, his coffee mug still in hand. "Define a lot, Mike." "At least 300 vessels, sir. And they're big, really big." Mike's fingers danced across his console, bringing up detailed scans on the main screen. They're arranged in some sort of formation. Look ceremonial rather than tactical. The entire bridge crew watched as the scanner image resolved into clarity. The ships were indeed massive and completely impractical. Their hulls were covered in what appeared to be actual gold plating, with massive spires and decorative towers rising from their surfaces. They looked more like floating palaces than warships. "Are they serious?" James couldn't help but chuckle. "Who puts towers on a spaceship?" His weapons officer, Linda, snorted. "Someone who's never been in a real fight. That's who. One good hit, and those pretty spires would snap right off." Before anyone could respond, the communications panel lit up with an incoming transmission. The main screen switched to show an alien bridge that looked more like a throne room. Marble columns lined the walls, and what appeared to be actual tapestries hung in the background. In the center sat a creature that looked almost human, except for its bright purple skin and elaborately decorated uniform that had more metals than actual fabric. "Attention, unknown vessel," the alien announced in a booming voice. "You have entered the domain of the great and eternal Galactic Empire. I am High Commander Robert of the Imperial First Fleet. You will immediately surrender your vessel and prepare to be integrated into our glorious realm." James took another sip of his coffee, trying very hard not to smile. "This is Captain James of the Earth exploration vessel Wanderer. While we appreciate the theatrical introduction, we're going to have to decline the surrender." The alien's face turned a deeper shade of purple. "Perhaps you do not understand your situation. You face the mightiest fleet in the known galaxy. Our weapons can reduce planets to ash. Our ships are forged from materials your primitive minds cannot comprehend." "Is that actual gold plating on your ships?" Linda asked, not even trying to hide her amusement. "Of course. The finest gold from 1,000 conquered worlds, befitting our status as the supreme civilization," Robert declared proudly. James pinched the bridge of his nose. The Empire had just confirmed they were flying around in ships covered in one of the softest metals in existence. He glanced at his science officer, Bill, who was quietly shaking with suppressed laughter. "Right," James said, keeping his voice steady. "And those lovely towers on your ships, they're also necessary for supreme civilization status. They are the spires of victory, commemorating our 10,000 years of undefeated conquest." Robert was practically glowing with pride now. "Each one tells the story of a world brought under our benevolent rule." "Fascinating," James replied, watching as his tactical display showed the Empire's ships still trying to complete their elaborate formation. They moved with all the grace of drunk ducks, their oversized decorations clearly affecting their maneuverability. "And how long does it usually take for worlds to surrender when they see your impressive fleet?" "Most civilizations begin their submission rituals within moments of our arrival," Robert declared. "Yet you show no fear. Perhaps a demonstration of our power is in order." James shared a knowing look with his crew. They had already scanned the Empire's weapons, energy projectors that Earth had surpassed centuries ago, and shells filled with what appeared to be simple explosive powder. The most advanced technology on their ships appeared to be their life support systems, and even those were running at barely 60% efficiency. "By all means," James said, settling into his command chair with a grin. "Show us what you've got." High Commander Robert's face filled the main screen as he prepared to demonstrate the Empire's mighty weapons. Behind him, His bridge crew rushed around in elaborate uniforms, pulling levers and pressing buttons with excessive ceremony. "Watch and tremble as we power up our planet killer beam," Robert announced, raising his arm dramatically. "In exactly 3 hours, you will witness destruction beyond your comprehension." Captain James blinked. "I'm sorry, did you say 3 hours?" "Yes, 3 hours to charge our most devastating weapon." Robert looked confused at the human's reaction. Most species use this time to prepare their surrender ceremonies. Linda, the weapons officer, couldn't contain herself anymore. She burst out laughing, quickly trying to cover it with a cough. "Sir, should I show them our basic defense screen readings?" James nodded, still fighting to keep a straight face. "Please do, Linda." The tactical display showed the Empire's energy readings. Their mighty planet killer beam was using roughly the same power as an Earth coffee maker. Even worse, most of that energy was being lost to decorative light shows around their ships. "Your scanning technology must be malfunctioning," Robert declared. "But while we charge our main weapon, witness the speed of our fighter ships." The Empire's smaller vessels broke formation, moving at what they clearly thought was an impressive pace. The human crew watched in amazement as the fighters took nearly 5 minutes to complete a simple turn. Bill, the science officer, checked his readings again. "Captain, their top speed is, well, it's about what we achieved back in 2080, with chemical rockets." "Impossible," Robert shouted. "Our ships are the fastest in the galaxy. Watch as we demonstrate our superior maneuverability." The Imperial fighters began what was supposed to be an intimidating display. Instead, they moved like tired ducks in formation, their gold-plated hulls reflecting starlight as they slowly went through their routines. One fighter got too close to another, and their decorative spires tangled together. Mike at the scanner station raised his hand. "Sir, should we help them? Those 2 ships have been trying to untangle themselves for the past 10 minutes. "Not yet, Mike. I want to see where this goes," James replied, pouring himself another cup of coffee. The Empire's ships were now attempting what appeared to be their version of a battle formation, but their oversized decorations kept getting in the way. "Behold our mighty armor," Robert continued, oblivious to the growing amusement on the human bridge. "Our ships are covered in the most precious metals in the galaxy." Linda pulled up the material analysis on her screen. "Captain, they're literally flying around in ships covered in gold and silver. One good hit would." She trailed off, shaking her head in disbelief. "And now," Robert announced, "we will show you our fearsome boarding technology." The crew watched as a small Imperial shuttle slowly made its way toward the Wanderer. It was covered in so many decorative carvings that it looked more like a floating museum piece than a military vessel. The shuttle took nearly 20 minutes to cover a distance that a human ship could cross in seconds. "Should we tell them about our transport technology?" Bill whispered to James. "Not yet," James replied quietly. "Let's see what they do next." The Imperial shuttle finally reached their ship, and Robert's voice boomed again. "Prepare to be amazed by our advanced docking procedure." What followed was perhaps the most elaborate and inefficient docking sequence any of the human crew had ever witnessed. The Imperial shuttle performed a series of unnecessary spins and loops, all while playing what seemed to be ceremonial music through external speakers. "This is our standard docking protocol," Robert explained proudly. "It only takes 45 minutes. James looked at his crew, all of whom were trying desperately not to laugh. Earth ships could dock in under a minute, and that was considered slow by modern standards. "Very impressive," James managed to say. "Though I have to ask, has your empire ever actually fought anyone with similar technology to yours?" Robert's proud expression faltered slightly. "Well, no. Most species surrender as soon as they see our golden ships and ceremonial displays. Are you not intimidated?" James took another sip of his coffee. "Let's just say we have a few surprises of our own." After the painfully long docking sequence, the Imperial diplomats finally entered the Wanderer through their airlock. The human crew gathered to meet them, trying hard not to stare at their visitors' impossibly elaborate outfits. The lead diplomat, Lord William, wore what appeared to be a full suit of golden armor covered in blinking lights. The armor was so heavy that he needed 2 assistants just to walk forward. Behind him, 4 more diplomats struggled under the weight of their ceremonial robes. "We have come to accept your—" Lord William stopped mid-sentence, looking around in confusion. "Where are your marble floors? The golden walls? The ceremonial guard of 1,000 warriors?" Captain James gestured to the ship's clean, practical corridors. "This is a working vessel. We prefer function over decoration." But how do you show your power?" William asked, genuinely confused. "Where are your victory tapestries? Your conquest murals?" "We show our power by getting things done," Linda replied, walking past with a tablet in her hand. She was wearing standard work clothes and carrying a cup of coffee. "Speaking of which, your ship's reactor is leaking energy from 3 different places. Want us to take a look at that?" William gasped, his armor creaking. A worker speaking directly to a diplomatic lord. This is unheard of. "And what is this? Coffee you all keep drinking. Here, try some," Mike offered, holding out a fresh cup. "Just be careful with your armor. It looks expensive." The Imperial diplomats huddled together, whispering frantically. Finally, William stepped forward and attempted to take the cup. His armored gloves were so ornate that he couldn't grip the simple mug. "Allow me to help," James said, holding back a smile. He helped William remove his gloves, revealing perfectly normal hands underneath. William took a sip of coffee and his eyes widened. This is amazing. But where are the golden cups? The ceremonial drinking protocols. The 3-hour blessing ritual. Sometimes a drink is just a drink, Bill said, walking by with a stack of scientific reports. "By the way, we analyzed your ship's computer systems. Did you know you're running everything on what we'd consider a child's gaming computer?" The Imperial diplomats looked increasingly uncomfortable. Their elaborate outfits, which had probably intimidated countless other species, looked ridiculous next to the humans' practical clothing. "Perhaps," William said carefully, "you would like to see our ceremonial combat demonstration. It takes only 6 hours to prepare." Or, James suggested, "You could join us for lunch in the mess hall. No ceremonies required." The concept of a meal without ritual clearly shocked the Imperials, but their curiosity won out. They followed the humans to the mess hall, their armored boots clanking on the metal floor. The sight of crew members simply walking in, getting food, and sitting down to eat nearly caused William to faint. But where are the food tasters, the poison checkers, the ritual feast singers? "We just eat when we're hungry," James explained, picking up a sandwich. "Though I recommend taking off more of that armor first. Can't imagine it's comfortable." One by one, the Imperial diplomats removed pieces of their ceremonial armor. Underneath, they looked surprisingly normal, if a bit pale from spending so much time in ceremonial gear. "This is all very strange," William admitted, awkwardly holding his own sandwich. "In the Empire, every action must show our power and glory. Even studying takes 12 years of ceremonial preparation before opening the first book." "That explains a lot," Linda mumbled, earning a gentle elbow from James. "Tell me," William asked, finally taking a bite of his sandwich, "how has humanity achieved so much without proper ceremonies?" James considered the question. "We learned pretty early that the universe doesn't care about ceremony. It cares about what works. Every hour spent on elaborate rituals is an hour not spent making things better." William looked down at his now discarded armor, then at his sandwich, then at the efficient human crew around him. For the first time, doubt crept into his expression. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "the Empire has something to learn from humanity." "That's the first sensible thing you've said all day," James replied with a smile. More coffee. After lunch, Lord William insisted on demonstrating the Empire's superior technology. Captain James and his crew politely followed the Imperial diplomats back to their ship, trying not to wince at the impractical golden corridors that forced them to walk sideways. "Behold," William announced, pointing to a massive room filled with blinking lights and giant levers. "Our main control center. It takes 50 crew members just to make the ship turn left." Mary, the human engineer who had joined them, stared at the complex system with a mix of horror and fascination. "Why do you need 50 people? This could all be handled by a simple computer." "Computers?" William laughed. "You mean the thinking boxes? Those are only for entertainment. Real power comes from proper ceremony and manual control." Mary walked over to one of the control panels, her trained eye spotting dozens of problems. "Your power coupling is leaking energy into space. That's why it takes 3 hours to charge your weapons." "Impossible," William declared. "Our systems were perfected 10,000 years ago. We haven't changed a single golden bolt since then." "That's kind of the problem," Mary muttered. She pulled out her tablet and displayed a simple diagram. "Look, if you just rerouted these 3 circuits and removed these decorative power crystals, you could improve efficiency by about 800%. The Imperial technicians gathered around her tablet, their eyes widening. One of them, a younger officer named Tim, spoke up hesitantly. But where would we put the ceremonial power dancers?" "The what now?" Mary asked. "The ceremonial power dancers," Tim explained. "They dance for 6 hours before each engine starts to ensure proper alignment with the galaxy's energy." James exchanged looks with his crew. The Empire's technology wasn't just outdated. It was buried under layers of unnecessary ceremony that actively made it worse. "Perhaps a demonstration," William suggested, still trying to maintain his dignity. "Behold as we fire our secondary weapons array." What followed was both amusing and painful to watch. 50 Imperial crew members formed a line, passing written orders down one by one. Each order had to be stamped with 3 different golden seals before moving forward. By the time the firing command reached the weapons station, nearly an hour had passed. "Fire," William commanded proudly. A small energy bolt emerged from the Imperial ship, traveling so slowly that the human crew could practically see individual particles moving through space. "That's it?" Linda asked. "That's your secondary weapon?" "Of course not," William huffed. "This is just the warning shot. The real shot comes after another hour of charging." Mary couldn't take it anymore. "Your whole power system is running at maybe 5% efficiency. All these golden decorations are actually blocking your energy flow. And why do you have actual candles burning next to sensitive electronics?" "The sacred flames of power must never go out," Tim explained, then rushed to perform a quick 3-minute flame blessing ceremony. James decided it was time for a small demonstration. "Mary, would you mind showing them our basic engine control system?" Mary pulled up a holographic display of the Wanderer's engine room. The Imperial diplomats gasped at the clean, efficient design. There wasn't a single golden decoration or ceremonial candle in sight. "This is wrong," William protested. "Where are the celebration rings? The victory poles? The engine blessing pools?" "We found that engines work better without swimming pools next to them," Mary explained patiently. "Look, your basic technology isn't bad. It's just buried under 10,000 years of extras." Tim looked thoughtful. "You mean we could go faster without the ceremonial weight of the golden towers, and fire weapons without waiting for 3 different blessing ceremonies?" Another Imperial engineer added hopefully. William saw he was losing control of the situation. But the ceremonies are what make us powerful." "No," James said kindly. "They're what's holding you back. Would you like to see what your ships could really do?" The Imperial engineers looked at each other, then at their inefficient systems, then back at the humans' clean design. Slowly, they nodded. William sighed heavily, his ceremonial armor creaking. The Empire is not going to like this. While the Imperial diplomats were still processing their technological reality check, new alerts flashed across both ship sensors. Lord William rushed to his ceremonial viewing screen, which took 3 minutes to warm up and required 2 people to hand crank into position. "More ships approach," he announced dramatically. "They must be coming to witness our glorious." He stopped mid-sentence, his purple face turning pale. Through the viewing screen, massive shapes emerged from hyperspace. The human defense fleet had arrived. 5 human ships appeared, each one making the Imperial vessels look like toys in comparison. They moved with impossible grace, their sleek designs free of any decorative elements. The lead ship, the Guardian, was nearly the size of a small moon. "Oh," William said in a very small voice. Those are your ships." Captain James nodded calmly. "Just a small defensive fleet. Admiral John sends his regards." The Imperial crew watched in stunned silence as the human ships demonstrated their capabilities. The Guardian crossed the entire system in seconds, its engines barely registering any power usage. Another ship, the Pioneer, created a defensive shield that could have contained the entire Imperial fleet inside it. "But," William stammered, "your ship is so small." "We thought." "The Wanderer is an exploration vessel," James explained. "Basically, a small scout ship." Mary pulled up a comparison diagram on her tablet. The Imperial ships, despite their grand appearance, were using technology that humans had surpassed centuries ago. Even their most powerful weapons couldn't scratch the paint on a human defense vessel. Admiral John's face appeared on the communication screen. A simple, clear image, unlike the Empire's fuzzy ceremonial viewers. He wore a plain uniform without a single decoration. "Captain James," John said with a smile, "I see you've made some new friends." The Imperial diplomats were still staring at the casual way humans commanded such power. No ceremonies, no rituals, not even a single golden decoration. "Impossible." High Commander Roberts' voice boomed across the communication channels. No civilization could advance this far without proper ceremonies, without the sacred rituals of power. John raised an eyebrow. "Would you like to see what else we can do?" At his word, a small drone launched from the Guardian. It created a holographic display showing thousands of human worlds, all more advanced than anything the Empire had achieved. Hidden colonies, research stations, and entire civilizations that had been operating right under the Empire's nose. "All this time," William whispered, "all these worlds." "We prefer to stay quiet," James explained. "We find it's better to focus on advancement than announcement." To demonstrate their point, the Guardian performed a series of jumps through space, each one covering distances that would take Imperial ships months to travel. The human crew didn't even need to sit down. Their artificial gravity and inertial dampeners were so advanced that they barely felt the movement. "And these are just our civilian ships," Linda added with a small smile. The Imperial diplomats looked at their own vessels, with their golden towers and ceremonial spires, and for the first time felt something they had never experienced before: embarrassment. "Perhaps," Tim said carefully, "we should reconsider some of our traditions." "Your ceremonies aren't wrong," James said kindly. "They're part of your culture. But they shouldn't get in the way of progress." William looked around at the human ships, then at his own fleet's impractical design. The Empire has ruled through spectacle and ceremony for 10,000 years. We thought we were the peak of advancement. "Sometimes," John replied, "the peak is just the beginning of a new climb." As if to emphasize his point, the Guardian created a small artificial sun, held it in a containment field for a moment, then safely dissolved it. The entire process used less energy than the Empire's ceremonial lighting systems. William removed his ceremonial crown, looking at it thoughtfully. "I believe," he said slowly, "we have much to learn from humanity." The human crews exchanged knowing smiles. The real negotiations were about to begin. 3 days after the human fleet's arrival, the Empire's leaders gathered in their most ceremonial meeting room aboard their flagship. The room was lined with golden statues and victory banners, but somehow they didn't seem as impressive anymore. High Commander Roberts sat on his elaborate throne. which had been reduced from its usual 15-foot height to a more practical 7 feet after several diplomats had fallen off during earlier meetings. Lord William stood nearby, having shed half of his ceremonial armor for comfort. Captain James and Admiral John sat in simple chairs across from them, drinking coffee as usual. The contrast between the humans' practical approach and the Empire's fading grandeur couldn't have been more clear. "Let us begin the negotiation ceremony," Robert announced, though with noticeably less enthusiasm than before. "First, the traditional 12-hour opening dance. Or," John suggested gently, "we could just talk." The Imperial leaders looked scandalized, but William stepped forward. "Perhaps, just this once, we could skip the ceremony." Robert's face turned a deeper shade of purple, but he nodded. The other Imperial officials looked relieved at not having to perform the traditional negotiation dances in their heavy ceremonial armor. "Here's our offer," James said, pulling up a simple holographic display. "We'll help you upgrade your technology. No conquest, no surrender, no loss of independence. Just cooperation." "But how will everyone know we're powerful without our golden ships?" one official asked. John smiled. "True power doesn't need to announce itself. Your people's lives could be so much better. Imagine ships that don't take hours to turn. Medical technology that actually heals people instead of requiring 3 days of ceremonial chanting. And you would just give us this technology." Robert asked suspiciously, "What's the catch?" "The catch," James explained, "is that you'll have to accept that you're not the most advanced civilization in space. You'll need to learn from others. To change." The Imperial leaders whispered among themselves. Tim, who had been invited as a technical advisor, spoke up. "The Engineering Guild has already found 50 ways to improve our ships just by removing decorative elements that block engine vents." "Heresy," shouted one old official. "The sacred vents must remain covered in gold." "The sacred vents," Tim replied firmly, "are why it takes us 6 hours to reach full speed." Mary, who had joined the human delegation, pulled up more diagrams. "We can help you keep your cultural identity while upgrading your technology. Your ceremonies don't have to disappear. They just need to stop getting in the way of progress." William looked at a piece of his discarded armor. "I must admit, it is nice being able to walk without 3 people helping me balance." "But what about our image?" Robert asked. "The Empire has always ruled through grandeur and ceremony. You could rule through actual achievements instead," John suggested. "Imagine being known for having the best medical care in the galaxy instead of the shiniest ships." The Imperial leaders looked at each other. Generations of tradition weighed against the promise of real advancement. The Empire had stayed the same for 10,000 years, believing they were perfect. Now they had to choose between comfortable stagnation and uncomfortable progress. "There is one more thing," James added. "We've detected 3 other expanding empires heading this way, ones that don't share our peaceful approach. Without upgrades, your ships won't stand a chance." That got their attention. Robert stood up from his throne, his ceremonial robes rustling. "You're saying we need your help to survive?" "We're saying," John replied carefully, "that the galaxy is bigger than you thought, and not everyone out there cares about ceremonial displays of power." William stepped forward. "I vote we accept the humans' offer." "The ceremonial voting process takes 5 days." An official protested. "All in favor, raise your hand," William said simply. Slowly, one by one, the Imperial leaders raised their hands. Even Robert, after a long moment, lifted his golden-gloved hand. "Well then," James said with a smile, pouring more coffee for everyone, "let's talk about your future." The Empire was about to change. And for the first time in 10,000 years, that change didn't require a single ceremonial dance. 6 months after the historic meeting, the Imperial flagship Golden Pride was undergoing its final upgrades. The massive golden towers had been replaced with efficient sensor arrays, and the ceremonial engine rooms now housed modern power cores. Captain James stood with Lord William on the observation deck, watching as teams of human and Imperial engineers worked together on the ships. "It's strange," William said, wearing a simple uniform that still managed to look dignified without a single piece of gold. 6 months ago, I would have demanded a 3-hour ceremony just to enter this room. And now?" James asked, handing him a cup of coffee, which had become extremely popular throughout the Empire. "Now I just walk in and get work done." William smiled. "Though we did keep some ceremonies. They're just shorter, more meaningful." Below them, Tim led a group of engineers in removing a giant decorative statue from an Imperial cruiser. The ship's performance had doubled just by removing the ceremonial weight. "How are the people taking the changes?" James asked. "Better than expected," William replied. "Turns out most of them were tired of spending 6 hours getting ready for work each morning. And the new medical technology has been a huge hit. Healing broken bones in minutes instead of performing week-long healing dances." A small Imperial ship zipped past the window, performing maneuvers that would have been impossible 6 months ago. Its pilot was one of the first graduates of the new Joint Training Program. "High Commander Robert still grumbles sometimes," William admitted. But even he had to admit that the new defense systems work better than ceremonial shield dances. "Speaking of defense," James said, "how did that meeting with the expanding empires go?" William grinned. "They took one look at our upgraded ships and turned around. No conflict, no ceremony, not even a single threat display. They just left." The observation deck's door slid open, and Mary walked in with her tablet. "The last of the old-style reactors has been replaced," she reported. "Fleet efficiency is up 900%. "And the ceremonial power dancers?" James asked with a smile. "We hired them to perform at Imperial festivals," William said. "Turns out they're much happier as actual dancers than as part of the engine system." Through the window, they could see the Imperial capital planet. The golden towers still stood, but now they housed schools, hospitals, and research centers. The endless ceremonial processions had been replaced with efficient public transportation. "Some things haven't changed," William noted. "We still love our traditions, but now we save them for special occasions instead of letting them run our lives." A group of Imperial children ran past the window, wearing normal clothes instead of ceremonial robes. They were playing with simplified versions of human tablets, learning and laughing. "The old guard said we would lose our identity," William continued. "But we haven't. We're still the Empire. We're just not stuck in the past anymore." "And the sacred texts that said technology had to be ceremonial?" James asked. "Funny thing about those," William chuckled. "We actually read them properly for the first time in thousands of years. Turns out they just said to treat technology with respect. Somewhere along the line, respect turned into cover everything in gold and dance around it." The ship's new communication system beeped, a simple sound that had replaced the traditional 30-minute alert symphony. "The first graduating class of the new Imperial Science Academy is ready," Mary announced. "No 6-hour ceremony," James teased. "Just a nice 2-hour celebration," William replied with a wink. "We're keeping the best parts of our culture while moving forward." Together, they watched as Imperial and human ships flew in formation. The Imperial vessels still had some golden decorations, but now they were streamlined and purposeful. Like the Empire itself, they had found a balance between tradition and progress. "You know," William said thoughtfully, "some of the other old empires have been asking about upgrading their ships too." James smiled. "Well, we do have some free time. And lots of coffee." The galaxy was changing, one ceremonial dance at a time. And for once, the Empire was leading the way forward instead of standing still in golden glory.